Alright. Hey guys, just want to take a quick minute. I know this week we are hitting in the intro biblical worldview. I wanted just to take a couple minutes and just share kind of how to teach this in a sense. I know you've got all the Bible verses and documents that we sent out in the email in the Dropbox. Hopefully you had some time to see the video that I put under the first week where he goes over God's story in a brief way. I think that's really good. The more we can get competent in that, the better. But this week we're going to be talking about creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Don't have too much time to go deep on all of these, but just at a snapshot, creation, we want to hit, hey, what God created, He did it for His glory, and it was good, as it says in Genesis 1:31. Psalm 19, 1-4, again, the heavens declare the glory of God. When you look at the works of His hands, you can't help to wonder that He is God. You know, that was Paul's argument in Romans 1. So, anything that deals with God's attributes, His ways, you know, everything that Tozer wrote in the Knowledge of the Holy would qualify under creation here, who God is, what He's like. And so, briefly hit that. We don't have all the time to go too deep into that. We'll hit that down the road in our house church framework. But this week I really want to hit the fall. What did we fall from? We don't know. The gospel's not good news if we don't know the bad news. And a biblical worldview kind of creates the backdrop for why the gospel is good news. The question is, what are we saved from? And so when we go through the first 3 chapters of Genesis, we see the narrative of God's good and His creation. He's happy. He's pleased with what He created. Man was created both in His image, both Adam and Eve, for His glory. God gave Adam and Eve dominion, gave Adam and Eve authority on the earth. And so there's a lot in those first 3 chapters of Genesis. But when we get to Genesis 3, that's when we hit the fall. And this is what I really want to focus on this week. And so please don't go line by line on reading the outline or go verse by verse. Make the story come alive. Hopefully you have a chance to print all these documents out and hand them out to everybody in your house church. But when we get to the fall, that's what we want to really focus on. What did Adam and Eve fall from? What happened in the garden? Why was Eve and Adam, for the most part, tempted to distrust God? Why were they tempted to to believe that God was holding something back from Him? That was the real issue, was unbelief and pride. And the enemy is very good at distorting truth and accusing our hearts towards God. And so this is not a neutral ground. When we come to Genesis 3, verse 1, we find a serpent. And so that's not a neutral ground. It's kind of like a defensive one, where sin is at the door, and now you have temptation in your face. And now you have accusations you have to deal with. Before that wasn't there, now that is there. And so we see sin coming through the doorway of Genesis chapter 3. So we want to hit that. And we also want to, there's a lot in here to unpack, but Satan really severs trust in God's goodness, which made room for unbelief in Adam and Eve's heart. The question is, where's Adam at when Eve's listening to this? Why is Adam not fulfilling his role to protect and serve his wife? And so that's one aspect of how sin came through, was Adam wasn't fulfilling his role as a man and as a husband. And so as Adam went passive under temptation, not only did Adam go passive under temptation, but once they fell and they realized they were naked, and in their shame they ran and hid themselves, God comes to them, initiates them, which I think is really the first scene of God as Redeemer, is that in the midst of sin and shame and running away from God, God pursues them and begins a dialogue with them. And so really redemption starts right there in Genesis chapter 3. But Adam, back to the story, blames God ultimately by saying, the wife you gave me opened the door to this. And so God's not looking for Eve, God's looking for Adam, because Adam has the authority and thus he has the responsibility. And so then sin was wide open to the whole human race. And so we want to hit the fall hard. We want to talk about what we fell from, what the human race fell from. And so the last sheet of the document for this week, the PDF, it's the bad news, the good news, along with the verses. And so we want to talk about how we're slaves. We want to talk about the guilt and the shame that came from sin. We want to talk about the debt. We want to talk about being rejected and far off and poor and blind, and now being born into sin, how we're under a heavy yoke, and how, in a sense, under sin we're condemned and we're alienated from God, and we're considered enemies of God because we aligned with Satan and basically his coup to overthrow God. And so God coming to rescue sinful man who's stuck in unbelief and pride is good news when we have a biblical worldview that God is good, and then we see man fall in the garden in Genesis chapter 3. So we're going to hit restoration a little more next week when we talk about what we're saved for, but we still want to hit it briefly. But of all four of these points, creation, fall, redemption, restoration, we want to take more time on the fall because that creates the backdrop for the gospel being good news. So do it through your own personality, do it through your own words, but make the story come alive. There's questions there for people to go through later on in the week. There's a lot of verses for them to study up on, but this is part of just being fluent in the gospel. This is training for me and you guys just as much as it's training for anybody who's on the listening end to this. So really take this opportunity to get familiar with these passages, to communicate it well in your own personality and in your own words, make the story come alive, and bring some questions to it, and begin to stir up some dialogue on these points. So hopefully this goes well for you this week. Love you guys. I'm going to hopefully do this in the next couple days for the following week, just so we can get started and kind of get into a rhythm together of how we're going to proclaim this stuff. So love you guys. Hope this helps. I will talk to you soon.